Hello YouTube, and welcome back to KT Replicas. My name's Caden, and today we're going to be continuing the journey on my custom Mandalorian suit. I'm super happy with how this turned out, and I'm really excited to take you through this crazy journey. So let's go back to the beginning. Okay, today we are going to be continuing the series of my Mandalorian armor build. This video's focus is going to be torso pieces, which is going to consist of the chest, abs, and back. I got a little bit of a head start sanding these a little while back whenever I was here working on the helmet. Nothing too crazy, just some 120 grit. So I'm going to be continuing what I started a couple months ago with a new little toy. It's a electronic foot sander. This was heavily recommended by Emma's Prop Shop in all of her videos. I'll leave a link to her down in the description below, as well as the product. So we're going to be getting started with this and knocking down all of the major print lines on the raw prints with that right now, and then we will move on to the next steps afterwards. So let's get started. As I stated earlier, this new sander was almost entirely new to me. I really enjoyed using it, but I did learn that it's not necessarily for large flat surfaces like that backplate that you see there, but it's great for smaller, more intricate pieces, and it speeds up your hand sanding time by so much, so I really recommend it. Now, I do see some pretty significant layer lines in areas where supports were on the prints, so I'm going to do a round of Bondo, filler, and spot putty, or excuse me, glazing and spot putty. I'll link that in the description below. It's toothpaste-ish consistency body filler, and I'm going to be putting it over a lot of these very extreme layer lines and deformations in the prints. And in between that, I'm just going to be hitting with some hand sanding over any miscellaneous areas that this kind of roughed up, or this roughed up a decent amount, since it is an electric sander. So it's not going to be perfect, and it's far from subtle. So let's get started with that. As usual, when you're working with Bondo, you need to make sure you're wearing your proper PPE, which consists of a respirator and some gloves, because this stuff is really nasty. Now that this Bondo's had its chance to dry, we're just going to be doing more of the same process. This time, it's going to be this detail sander with some 220 grit sandpaper on it, as well as just some hand sanding with 220 grit. And then we will be filler priming right after. So I'm going to do that, and then we're going to cut right to filler priming. Alrighty, so I got all these pieces sanded down pretty well to 220. I decided to put an extra line of Bondo on here since this seam is pretty bad. This is where I glued the back pieces together. But yeah, so now we're going to be in the filler primer stage, where I will be using Seymour gray filler primer, my go-to for this project. Anyways, let's get it started, trying to get it done by tonight. Before I spray these parts, I'm using a handheld broom to get any of the excess dust from my sanding off of the parts before spraying it with its first coat of filler primer. I do want to stress again, be smarter than me and actually put your respirator on before you start spraying. Alrighty, and here is all the chest pieces after their first coat of filler primer. I can already see places I'm going to have to do some work with seams and layer shifts and stuff like that, which I knew were there, but it was pretty hard to see after the Bondo and stuff like that. Also, these are the arms that I'm working on. Video that's going to come out after this, but I'm trying to get them done around a similar time frame, so we'll sneak peek. But yeah, looking pretty solid. I decided to address these layer shifts and seam lines with another layer of Bondo, which is going to be a recurring theme with any 3D printed project. So I got our next round of Bondo on here, just trying to fix some of the major deformities that I'm dealing with on this chest plate and back plate, as well as some little layer shifts that I got on these smaller pieces here. So just like before, we're hitting it with 220 again, and we're gonna repeat this process until I can't see or feel these things anymore. So you're probably gonna get miscellaneous time lapses if this doesn't hammer it out completely right now, but only time will tell. But I will see you back whenever we're done with this. So I'm gonna get started on it. Now here begins the infinitely repetitive process of sanding and priming and sanding and priming. If you're in the process of or getting started on your own suit, you better get used to this process. I spray filler primer between every step up in grit so that I can get a nice vision of what I'm working with, as well as fill in any small cracks or anything like that that I could have created with the sandpaper as I worked through. Here's a brief little intermission to see where we're at now. This is the chest piece, and it turned out pretty solid. The back, on the other hand, isn't going as well. We're having a little bit of success hiding this seam, but just gonna have to keep fighting with it. So we'll continue that now. Now this is where things started to get pretty difficult. No matter what I did to this back plate, I could not get this big seam to hide or go away at all. I went through many rounds of Bondo and sanding and filler primer, and I tried many different techniques, but nothing I did seemed to work. And this is where disaster struck. I decided it would be a good idea to go back down to 100 or 200 grit and just hammer this seam. But this exposed the biggest flaw in my back plate, and that was this weak seam. I snapped it right along the attachment points. At this point in time, I was really upset with myself because I was pretty far into the process of sanding this backplate, and this part may never be even again. But that didn't stop me from trying. I immediately tried to salvage this backplate using the detail sander as well as the electronic foot sander to scrape up all of the JB weld I had used on the back of this backplate so that I could get a cleaner surface to work with as I move forward. I then followed the sanders up with a paint scraper to try to get as much of the JB weld off as possible and leave a flat surface for the next step. And here I'm aligning the two parts to try to make them as flush as possible and taping them together with frog tape so that we can move forward to the next step. Well, this has not been a very fun revelation for me. Pretty tragic, honestly, but I am just glad that I had it happen to me now and not while I was finishing up with clear coating and painting and all that kind of stuff, because that would have been even worse. Just having to basically ruin the finish on the front side, but didn't happen, so thank goodness for that. Now, I'm kind of starting to run out of options on what I can do here. I've done 5-minute epoxy, JB weld, super glue, and then just my traditional like melting the seams into each other with a soldering iron. But now I'm just gonna do something pretty similar to that last option where I just do some additive welding, very similar to your traditional stick welding. So yeah, this is basically all I've got. In the worst case scenario, I have to reprint and restart, but it is what it is. We'll see how this goes, and yeah. I think the biggest mistake I made when working on a backplate like this is that I didn't get a plastic welder. That tool is literally designed for this exact use case scenario, but I decided I didn't need it. Thankfully, this experience has pushed me to get my hands on one so that I don't have to deal with this again. But until then, I will be additive PLA welding for the rest of this process. Now that all of these seams have been welded together, it's time to hit it with another round of sanding, going right back to the beginning and using the lowest grit I could get my hands on. After that first round of rough sanding, a little bit of that plastic just chipped off and left some decent sized gaps, so I filled those using some JB Weld. So it's been a little while now, and I've been attacking this back plate for about a day and a half, 2 days. But I don't want to get burnt out on it, so although it's not done, I'm going to be moving on with the rest of these right now and sanding with the 400 grit sandpaper to get them paint ready, get their black base coat on, just as a motivator to keep moving forward, because this has been incredibly frustrating to deal with. But I'm not afraid to admit that I made my fair share of mistakes on it. So moving forward, let's get these 400 grit sanded. I'm probably not going to show a whole lot of it because you've seen so much sanding. And yeah, we'll get it ready for painting, and that'll be the next step. So let's do it. I originally started off this round by dry sanding, and then I realized pretty quickly that when you're dry sanding with a high grit, that sandpaper can get clogged up super fast. So right here, I switched to wet sanding, which I just use a spray bottle of water, keeps things really compact and mobile. So I did that for the rest of these parts. After wet sanding, those parts are super nasty, so I took them outside and I sprayed them down, and once I was done with that, I brought them back inside and I wiped them down with a towel. Alright, so I gave them the night to dry, so I'm going to be hitting it with its first coat of black spray paint, using the flat black from Rust-Oleum. Not 100% sure if this is going to be the final coat for some of these pieces or not, but I guess we will see. But for now, getting a good base coat on there is pretty important, so that's what we're going to do. So let's get started. Unlike when working with filler primer, you do want to be pretty light with these coats. You want to minimize the amount of dripping that can happen when you do heavy coats, and the paint tends to look better when you spread it evenly across multiple coats. Once that first layer is fully dried, I moved on to taping off the portions that are going to be painted the accent color. I strongly recommend some super thin automotive painter's tape for these initial trimming pieces, but afterwards frog tape works great. Also, just throw on a video and relax throughout this process. It's going to take a while, but it's totally worth it. Alright, so we are going to be moving forward with the suit by doing some of the gunmetal gray spray painting. I taped up these pieces the other day. You saw a clip of me taping the chest piece, but this is an ad piece. Here's one of the collar pieces, and we're going to be doing the gunmetal accents on these right now. I still have the back plate, jeez, it's gigantic, in progress. It's getting a little better since I screwed it up. But yeah, just trying to make some progress on this, but I've been pretty busy recently, so just tacking on what I can. But for now, we're gonna focus on the paint and get this tape peeled up. So let's do it. Just like with our first coat of paint, make sure to be light with this one, especially if you're using the Rust-Oleum metallic paints, because they run pretty quickly. Also, I paid for my laziness here. Just tape off the whole part and don't try to believe that you're accurate with a rattle can. For some reason, I decided that this was the part I wanted to try something new on, which was a mixture of acetone and Bondo to make a new kind of filler. As you can see here, it failed miserably and started peeling up the top layer of the PLA that is under what I already had on it. So I scrapped it. I have zero clue why what happened, but if anybody knows, please leave a comment down below. But until then, I've got to catch up on this backplate. So let's get a montage going of all the work that goes in to get back up to speed. Okay, so it's been a while since I actually sat in front of the camera and talked in real time. There have been a lot of time lapses, a lot of recaps and stuff like that, because specifically this back plate here just been giving me a lot of trouble. But I'm finally at a place where I feel comfortable moving forward and getting these done without having to take many steps backwards. So now we're going to be painting most of these torso pieces their final gunmetal color. As you saw previously with the chest piece, I decided that I was going to paint just the middle stripe, but that didn't really sit well with me. I ended up looking back at my original concept art that I made and realized that I had outlined most of the black pieces with a gunmetal trim, and that's kind of the idea I had in my head whenever I made these original design choices. But we're going to take a step back and do it the way that I originally intended. So yeah, I spent a long time taping off these pieces over the course of many days, just off camera, because I would come home from work and tape some stuff off and go to bed and repeat the process. But yeah, so we're finally here, and we're gonna get this started. Hopefully the humidity outside doesn't mess with this too much, but we will see. So let's go. Once that coat of paint was dry, we can finally get some tape peeling clips. I know a lot of people really enjoy these, so here's some of that. Once I peeled that tape off, I did a little bit of touch-ups here and there with some hand painting, and this is where we ended up. Here's all the pieces laid out so that you can see what they look like all together. I think they look really nice. Now that all the paint is done on these, we can move on to my favorite part, which is weathering. I use silver ribbon buff, a file, and then some paint brushes, all to simulate scratching. I never really plan my weathering, I kind of just sit down and do it, and I think that really adds to the effect of randomization. I typically like to target the raised edges because that is naturally what gets worn first, but I do go a little far on my weathering because I want to look like I went through battle. So I used a file to actually add real scratches and then went over them with the ribbon buff to simulate the best car that would be underneath the chest plate as well as any of the other pieces. And here are some clips so that you can see where I finished off with all of the weathering. I think it turned out really nice. I really like how consistently they go with each other. Again, I don't do anything intentionally. I kind of just sit there with a brush and go till I feel like it's sufficient. So yeah, I'm really happy with how it turned out. So we can finally move on to the clear coating process. For this, I use Rust-Oleum's Satin Clear Coat. I think it gives the perfect amount of sheen for what I'm looking for. Just like with the other coats, don't go too heavy because the last thing that you want is runs and drips on your final coat of rattle can anything on your parts. So just spray them nice and light and even. And after weeks of working on how to put this armor on, this is where I ended up. Also, these are the blasters I'm going to be wearing with the suit. I decided to make it a side project, but they're entirely resin printed, barely sanded, and basically just painted. Love how they turned out. Take a look at these. But anyways, thank you guys so much for watching. I really appreciate you sticking around. The next portion of this project, I'll be working on the arms, so keep your eye out for that video. But until then, Have a great rest of your day.